The night Daniel Foster signed his name in careful ink, thunder rattled Cornwell House and rain battered its ancient stones. Outside, the world drowned in darkness and debt. Inside, two strangers sat beneath the chandelier's chill, bound not by love but by secrets. For Daniel, the silence was almost a mercy, until he realized that in this house, even the shadows kept watch. A leaden sky weighed down on Dryden, Texas, as if threatening to squeeze the life from the tired college town. Rain churned the gutters to rivers and smeared the neon of Main Street into streaks of washed-out color. Daniel Foster squinted against the downpour, his backpack threatening to split from the weight of overstuffed textbooks and the responsibilities he carried like stones. He ducked beneath the flickering awning of the 24-hour pharmacy, shivering in his thin jacket that had lost its fight against the wet. At 23, Daniel had known more survival than living. His days were carved into study, minimum wage shifts at the grocery, and phone calls with polite but insistent debt collectors. A muffled cough from his mother's bedroom when he was home could ruin his sleep for a week. Emily, his kid sister, was in her first semester at the community college, and their mother's medical bills seemed to multiply every time he managed to pay one down. Tonight, exhaustion clung to him like sweat. He'd just finished a grueling double shift at work and had an exam in less than 12 hours. He was halfway deciding whether he could justify spending another $1 on instant ramen when his phone trilled in his pocket. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. Expectations of either a scam or another bureaucratic reminder about past due notices, but a gut feeling made him swipe to accept. "Hello." His voice cracked. The answer was crisp, rich with control, female, older, polished in the way rich voices were. "Mr. Foster, this is Anna Wetherall. I'd like you to meet me for dinner at the Starlight Grill, 7:30. A cold shiver traced his neck. "Sorry, do I know you?" "I know of you, Daniel," she said. Underneath the immaculate diction, exhaustion, perhaps even chill vulnerability, lurked. "Especially your financial situation. Do you want to see your mother back home, your sister through school? I can help, if you meet me." He hesitated, suspicion and curiosity entangled. "Why? You'll understand when you see me." An imperious pause. "Don't be late, Daniel." The line clicked dead, leaving only the hammer of rain and the anxious stammer of his heart. For several moments he just stared at his phone, half convinced he'd dreamed the call. Starlight Grill was the sort of place that catered to old money and visiting executives. He could barely imagine walking through its doors in clean clothes, let alone soaked and frayed as he was. But something in her voice tugged at him. Not just arrogance, but the heavy certainty of someone unused to refusal. As he left for the restaurant, his mind ran wild, debts, schemes, what-ifs. He could still turn back, but he didn't. The rain blurred the world, making futures and pasts indistinct as he quick-stepped toward Anna Wetherall and whatever impossible proposition awaited. The Starlight Grill existed in another universe from Daniel's life, a cocoon of gleaming wood, discreet laughter, and white linen that didn't have a single salt stain in sight. He felt every threadbare inch of his clothing as the maitre looked him over, but after murmured words into her headset, he was ushered past tables buzzing with quiet affluence to a secluded booth at the back. Anna Wetherall rose as he approached, her presence somehow amplifying the hush around them. She must have been in her early 70s, yet she radiated an energy that seemed to warp the temperature of the room. Steel gray hair swept back from a patrician face, her emerald scarf, immaculately tied, provided the only splash of color. Daniel registered expensive rings, a watch that probably cost more than his tuition, and most strikingly, eyes that seemed to catalog every flaw and hope in his posture. "Mr. Foster," she said and extended a hand, not for shaking but as a gesture of inclusion or invitation or challenge, he couldn't decide. He barely managed a greeting before she signaled for him to sit. A server appeared as if conjured by thought, pouring sparkling water and disappearing before Daniel could refuse. Anna regarded him with a half-smile as thin as the stem of her wineglass. "You have questions," she observed. "More than one," Daniel replied, His hands locked together beneath the table to keep them from shaking. But I'll start with the obvious. How do you know me? She lifted her glass, eyes glinting. I research people before I invest in them. Call it a habit from business or from life. Your academic record is impressive. You work 2 jobs. You haven't missed rent, though you're always on the edge of eviction. Everyone in Dryden has a story. Yours is more honest than most. The compliment hit him like a backhand. He bristled, trying to control the quaver in his voice. Is this charity? Anna's smile vanished. No, this is a transaction. She paused, letting silence spider across the linen. I wish to propose marriage, she said, each word measured as if they were part of a carefully negotiated deal. Daniel stared. He hadn't misheard. I'm sorry, what? Her voice was low, not unkind, but utterly matter-of-fact. This would not be a romantic union. It is a legal arrangement, a business partnership, if you will. In exchange for your companionship, for appearing at my side at certain events, and for adhering to a few simple rules, I will pay off your debts, provide for your mother's health care, and ensure your sister's education. I will also fund your postgraduate pursuits if you wish. It was absurd. It was surreal. Daniel found himself running a hand through his damp hair, at a loss for words. Why? He managed at last. Anna folded her hands, gaze shifting momentarily to a place far beyond the mahogany panels. For reasons that are personal, suffice to say this would be mutually advantageous. Daniel found his throat dry. And if I refuse? You won't. Not if you want to save them, she said simply, her verdict as cold and heavy as the rain that beat against the windows. He spent the walk home dazed, half drifting through puddles and lamp-lit emptiness, the edges of reality blurring. Rainwater soaked through his shoes, but Daniel's mind burned with confusion and shame, and the glimmer of hope he hardly dared acknowledge. At the creaking door of their rented duplex, he wiped his feet and braced himself. The living room was still except for the soft hum of the oxygen machine. His mother, Miriam, sat hunched in her sagging armchair, a crocheted blanket around her bony shoulders. The TV flickered on mute, shadows shifting over her face, pale from chemo and worry. Emily was curled on the end of the couch, textbooks open but eyes heavy with fatigue. You're late. Emily's voice was gentle, the kind she reserved for nights when she sensed he was at the edge of breaking. She patted the cushion beside her and scooted over to make space. Daniel sat, peeling off his wet jacket. There was an offer. He couldn't look directly at them as he explained. Every line of Anna's proposal, the way it felt like a life preserver and a pair of handcuffs at once. At first, Miriam just blinked, then coughed, a dry, racking sound, and leaned forward. Her eyes were glassy and frightened. She wants you to marry her? A stranger? Old money, Daniel whispered, as if saying it aloud would summon the devil. She said it's business, strictly business. If I do it, she'll save us from everything. If I don't. His voice cracked. Emily's eyes flashed, her fists knotting in her lap. Like we're just another thing she can buy, she hissed. Miriam's answer was quieter, almost broken. Danny, we've been fighting for so long. Maybe it's fate. It's not fate, it's desperation, he replied, a little louder than he meant. He rose, pacing between the coffee table and the old piano, the springs in the floor groaning. She's 70. I'm not even finished with college. I don't love her, or even know her. What does she really want from me? No one had an answer. Finally, after minutes of silence and his own shallow breathing, Miriam spoke, barely above a whisper. Would you hate me if I told you I want her to be real? I don't care about pride or what the neighbors might say. I just want you and Emily safe, Daniel. I want to see you both get a chance at life. Daniel slumped back onto the couch, overwhelmed by the enormity of the choice. He watched the rain course down the window, remembering Anna's face, worn, determined, and infinitely distant. It doesn't have to be forever, his mother finally said. Sometimes you start somewhere terrible and end in a good place. Daniel stared at his hands, thinking of all the things he'd ever started and all the places he'd never gotten. Sometimes there were no good choices, only necessity and hope. He nodded, eyes stinging. Okay, I'll meet her tomorrow. I'll sign whatever I have to. Emily hugged him tightly. His mother started to cry. Daniel closed his eyes and let their relief and sorrow wash over him, as if the rain were inside as much as out. Morning slipped in gray and soundless. Daniel awoke before the alarm could drag him from the thin sleep he'd managed. The weight of his decision settled heavy in his chest. He moved through the house quietly, savoring the sight of Emily's scattered textbooks, the gentle rise and fall of his mother's chest. Today, everything would change, if not for him, at least for them. By noon, he stood once again at the entrance of the Starlight Grill, this time dressed in his only suit, 2 years out of date and threadbare at the cuffs. Anna was waiting, punctual to the minute. Beside her, an older man in a navy suit busied himself with folders and pens, the lawyer Daniel guessed, or perhaps a witness to make the whole thing official. Anna's nod was almost approving, as if she doubted he'd show. She gestured him to a seat, her expression inscrutable. "Did you speak to your family?" she asked without preamble. Daniel nodded. "They understand. Good." She pressed a manila envelope toward him. "This is the contract. You'll find it more generous than any prenuptial agreement in the city. The essentials. You become my legal spouse, reside with me at Cornwell House, appear with me at public and family events, and respect my privacy. You will receive a monthly stipend, enough to maintain your obligations and a measure of independence. After 1 year, you may choose to leave. I will fund your education regardless." He scanned the pages, a dense web of provisions and legalese, but the central bargains were clear. No intimacy required, though public displays of affection were expected at social events. Discretion was not asked, it was demanded. Her assets were protected. His freedom was, by comparison, slight. Still, he would no longer carry fear in every step. His signature could save them all. Her lawyer, Mr. Smithson, watched Daniel over round spectacles. "Mr. Foster, you are under no coercion. Do you require more time or a legal advisor of your own?" Daniel shook his head, his throat dry. "No, I understand." Anna's eyes lingered on his face, searching for hints of hesitation or deceit. "You may yet come to hate me for this arrangement." He forced a half smile. "Hate isn't something I can afford." The contract slid beneath his pen, his name written once, twice, then again, on alternate pages. Each time it felt less like a flourish and more like a closing door. Smithson signed with elegant detachment. Anna's loops were steady and exact. When it was over, she regarded Daniel with the same measured coolness as before, yet something flickered at the edge of her smile. Relief or regret, he couldn't tell. "Welcome, Mr. Foster," she said quietly, "to your new life." He rose, unsteady, folding the contract into his bag. She closed her fingers around his wrist, her grip surprisingly warm. "There are rules, Daniel, and places in my house you are not to enter. You will have your rooms and your duties. Do not mistake this kindness for affection." He nodded numbly, his mind alight with worry and questions too tangled to speak aloud. They parted beneath the awning as the rain began again. Daniel watched her black car glide away into the mist, heart pounding, destiny changed, not by love but by necessity and a signature. He imagined the door of Cornwell House swinging open, swallowing him up like another of Anna's secrets. He had sold his future for a second chance. Now all that remained was to see what, if anything, he could buy back. Later that afternoon, Daniel stood in front of the iron gates that guarded Cornwell House. Even through the drizzle, the estate was imposing, a relic from another century, built in limestone and shadow, with steep gables and windows the size of doorways. Ivy curled hungrily up the outer walls, and somewhere beyond the hedges, a fountain's solitary trickle echoed in the wet garden. A driver met Daniel at the curb, taking his single battered suitcase with a murmured, "Follow me, sir." Daniel felt awkward in his own skin, aware of mud on his shoes, of the thinness of his coat in the mansion's grand foyer. Marble tiles stretched into glimmering infinity under a soaring ceiling. The air smelled faintly of lavender, old books, and somehow secrecy. Anna descended the main staircase, her presence drawing the gaze of staff members who lined up with careful formality. Her dress was deep blue, elegant but severe, pearls at her wrist, her expression unreadable. "Welcome, Daniel," she said in a tone that could have been genuine or merely rehearsed. "This is your home now." He nodded, swallowing hard, acutely aware of every eye upon him. Anna gestured to a stately woman who waited at her side, all crisp efficiency and soft edges. "This is Mrs. Green, the house manager. If you need anything, you ask her. She's discretion itself." Mrs. Green smiled, kind but practiced, and led him down labyrinthine corridors. Daniel passed glinting side tables, oil portraits whose eyes seemed to follow intruders, and doors that were firmly closed, their brass knobs polished to a cold shine. He was shown to the east wing, a suite at the rear of the house, larger than the entire apartment he'd shared with his family. There was a writing desk in one corner, a wardrobe full of pressed shirts, and windows overlooking a rose garden softened by mist. A bell chimed the hour somewhere in the depths of the house. Unpacking, Daniel felt like an actor on an unfamiliar stage. He remembered Anna's words: rules, boundaries, the price of rescue. Downstairs, staff moved with a precision that was almost martial. Their eyes slid over him with a mixture of curiosity and resignation. He wondered how many new faces the house had seen, how many hidden bargains played out under its roof. Dinner was at 7. He changed into clothes that weren't his. Someone had prepared a wardrobe, each size guessed with unsettling accuracy. In the formal dining room, Anna sat at the table's head, shadows thrown by a chandelier. She invited him to join her with a flicker of her hand. The meal, 3 courses worthy of a chef, tasted of expensive herbs and distance. Anna spoke rarely, mostly in courteous questions. "Your studies? Are you ambitious? Your mother's health? Is she improving?" She filmed kindness in her eyes, but something vigilant worked behind them. When dinner ended, Anna retired without ceremony, leaving Daniel in the echoing silence. Staff swept in, clearing away evidence of their meal, barely acknowledging his presence as they moved like ghosts. He explored the halls until fatigue returned. Each door he passed seemed to conceal a secret. Some had intricate locks, others bore names and histories he could only imagine. His footsteps sounded too loud, as if the house was waiting, listening, weighing him as surely as Anna had. Lying in his vast, perfectly made bed, Daniel finally let himself exhale. He'd crossed a threshold he could never uncross. Outside, the rain quieted. Inside, Cornwell House exhaled with him, slow, watchful, and silent. The following days blurred together, each governed by an odd mixture of formality and silence. Daniel found that the mansion's luxury chilled more than it warmed. Anna was a force. Her disciplined presence was felt even when she wasn't in the room. They shared most dinners, always at the same long table, always under the watchful gaze of a staff who never stayed to eat. Anna would ask questions that struck Daniel as necessary, not curious, about his coursework, his mother's treatment, never straying too far from the surface. She rarely spoke of herself. Once, Daniel asked about her past, about Cornwell House. She redirected with a smile as soft as a warning. "Certain histories comfort only their owners. The present serves us better, don't you think?" Days took on a precise rhythm. Staff guided Daniel around the estate. Breakfast laid out every morning, laundry whisked away before he noticed, appointments for him to attend charity events beside Anna. He did as asked, polite, distant, careful not to reach too far beyond the boundaries she laid out. "Some wings of the house are private, for my peace," Anna explained. "Please respect that." But not everyone adhered to the same script. Mrs. Green slipped him small kindnesses, a second helping of dessert, a question that reached for his comfort. The gardeners greeted him as Mr. Foster, but with a warmth absent from the echoing halls. Yet some staff members seemed to shrink from him. Whispers fell silent as he approached, eyes flicking coldly over his shoulder as he passed. Late one night, Daniel emerged from his suite, unable to sleep. The house, thick with late autumn rain, creaked and groaned in its bones. The clock in the main hall chimed midnight, distant as an orphaned memory. He wandered corridors emptied of staff, silent except for the storm outside and the faint drip of water somewhere above. Near the old billiards room, he heard hushed voices that fell quiet when his footsteps neared. He ducked behind a column, heart pounding. Not like the others, he's too observant. Doesn't matter, she has her reasons. Do you think he knows what happened to? The nearby door closed sharply, ending the exchange. Daniel stood rigid, hands cold. The others, the reasons. Questions burrowed into his mind like splinters. Whose secrets had he married into? Another afternoon, while Anna was out at a luncheon, Daniel explored the gallery, a room lined with portraits and glass display cases. Most rooms were open, but some remained locked or half covered in dust cloths. At the end of the corridor, the oldest portrait, a much younger Anna, radiant but unsmiling, her hand resting on the shoulder of a man with clever eyes and a haunted smile. The plaque read, Howard Wetherall, 1952-2009. The gallery's air felt suddenly heavy, as if it pressed the lost years down upon him. As Daniel stared into the faces, his own reflection stared back at him in the glass, uncertain, out of place, marked like every other secret in the house. That night, alone in the dark, he asked himself, what had Anna truly lost? And what exactly had he signed away? On his 10th day at Cornwell House, Daniel awoke to pale sunlight struggling through the glass. He'd expected time to dull his suspicions, but every day only sharpened them. The sense of being watched hadn't faded since that first late-night whisper. If anything, it grew. Twice he noticed a shadow slip past his door at odd hours, and more than once he returned to his suite to find small things shifted, a drawer not quite closed, an old book left open to a different page. Anna's routine never wavered. She rose before dawn, took her breakfast alone, spent hours in her study handling estate affairs or making brusque calls to attorneys and investment managers. Daniel was summoned to events. He played the dutiful husband amid the town's upper crust, always aware of the latent curiosity, sometimes even malice, in their eyes. He had become the latest topic of Dryden's rumor mill. Anna's young husband, some charity case. He heard the words in whispers behind linen napkins. But if the world outside the gates puzzled over his place, the world inside watched him much more closely. It was Mrs. Green who offered him comfort, in the way of someone who'd seen many storms pass overhead. One rainy morning, she caught him lingering in the lower vestibule, eyeing a locked mahogany door. She hesitated, then said, "Old wounds sleep behind that one. Some doors aren't meant to be opened, Mr. Foster, not even by the house's owners." Her words were a warning, but also a dare. That night, Daniel took to wandering again, his thoughts restless. By the main staircase, he noticed Anna emerging from her study, brows furrowed, holding a folder tight to her chest. Her footsteps were measured, but her urgency betrayed her, a rare crack in her armor. He followed, careful to stay hidden in the shadows. Anna paused at one of the locked doors. She knelt, retrieved something from her coat pocket, and deftly slipped inside, closing the door behind her. Daniel waited, pressed back into the gloom, barely breathing, until she returned 10 minutes later, alone, her expression composed but her eyes shining strangely, neither anger nor victory, but something softer, sadder. He returned to his suite, but sleep fought him. He replayed the image over and over, Anna at that door. What did she keep locked away, and why was she risking her calm to visit it? The following afternoon, a package arrived. The butler, Mr. Fenn, handed it to Daniel with a stiff formality. No note, only his name on the paper. Inside were 3 objects, an old photograph of Anna and a man, possibly her late husband, smiling on the Cornwell garden steps, a small brass key ornately engraved, and a thin, leather-bound diary, its pages brittle with age. His hands shook. This was no accident. Someone, Anna, Mrs. Green, had chosen to put pieces of the puzzle within his grasp. He slipped the key and diary beneath his mattress, heart slamming in his chest. Tonight, he promised himself, he would open both. Dinner that night pulsed with tension beneath its surface calm. Anna seemed distracted, barely tasting her soup, fingers drumming an off-tempo choreography along the rim of her plate. Daniel watched her, studying the deep lines framed by the candlelight, the contours of a life marked by effort, loss, and now, perhaps, regret. When Mrs. Green quietly poured more wine, Daniel cleared his throat. "You seem tired tonight." Anna's eyes flicked up, their clarity returning as she forced a smile. "You'd be tired too. if the only thanks for one's generosity was town gossip and lawsuits. Her tone was almost playful, but Daniel heard the exhaustion folded beneath. "Does it ever get less lonely?" he asked quietly, surprising himself with the bluntness of his question. A rare softness entered her gaze. For a moment she looked years younger. Not in a house this size. Not after 30 years of being necessary and never quite wanted. The remark lingered between them, vulnerable and sharp at the same time, and Daniel found himself unexpectedly moved. "I'm sorry for the things you've lost," he said, and meant it. Anna stiffened, the mask snapping back into place. "Don't be. Loss is the only true inheritance." She rose, nodding at Mrs. Green to clear the table, dismissing Daniel with a glance that hovered between warning and plea. Left alone, Daniel's restlessness grew unbearable. He retreated to his room and retrieved the diary and the key. His hands trembled as he opened the old book, its spine sighing. The first page was inscribed in delicate handwriting. "If memory is the weight of living, then let these pages lighten me." He read deep into the night, piecing together Anna's past, a marriage to Howard that began in promise but drowned in betrayal and shame, infidelity, corrupt deals, legal wars that left reputations ruined and fortunes devoured. The entries grew darker, Anna's voice sharpening. "He took everything, trusted no one. I became a ghost in my own home." But then, separate from Howard, he found the entry that hinted at something else. A name circled in the margin, Michael Carter, and beneath it, "My leverage if all else fails." The contract hidden. The debt remains unpaid. The next morning, as Daniel washed up in the ensuite, he studied the brass key in his palm, dizzy with questions. The contract hidden. Leverage. Had Anna herself sent him the key, inviting discovery? Or was someone else in the house engineering the revelation for reasons unknown? At breakfast, Anna was absent, engaged in one of her rare outings. Mrs. Green quietly handed Daniel a note. "If you open what is locked, beware." Truth is not always a freedom. It can be a new kind of chain. Daniel slipped the note into his pocket, heart hammering but resolve hardening. That night, when the house was as quiet as the shadow behind a closing door, Daniel crept from his suite, diary and key hidden under his jacket. He turned his steps toward the locked door, and whatever truth Anna kept hidden behind it. Every board beneath Daniel's feet seemed to amplify its groan as he crept down the east corridor that night, heart pounding, shrouded in the long, uncertain shadows cast by Cornwell House's ancient sconces. He clutched the brass key tight in his pocket and paused before the forbidden door, listening for any sounds from beyond, the whisper of movement, the cough of pipes. The house was silent, holding its breath. His hands shook as he slid the key into the lock. With a faint click, the latch disengaged. He waited, counting out 5 long, terrified heartbeats, then slowly nudged the door open. What greeted him was not outrage, but memory. The air inside was cool and dust-laden, barely disturbed in years. Faded wallpaper bloomed with muted roses, a relic of brighter times. Daniel advanced, half expecting alarms to blare or Anna herself to materialize behind him. The room was a time capsule. Against one wall, an old vanity held an array of antique perfume bottles and tarnished heirloom jewelry. In the center, a writer's desk was covered in yellowing legal documents, correspondence penned in looping script, and most chillingly, a photograph of Anna and the man from the gallery, Howard Wetherall. In this photo, Anna's expression hovered between hope and trepidation. Howard, by contrast, gripped her arm, his smile stretching too wide. Daniel's gaze fell next upon a locked metal box on the desk. He tried the key and felt the telling give of old tumblers falling open. Inside, he discovered papers neatly arranged, property deeds, financial records, and a thick contract, edges threatening to crumble. He scanned the contract beneath the thin light of a desk lamp, barely daring to breathe. Howard's name was there, as was Anna's, but more shocking was the signature on the third line, Michael Carter, the name from Anna's diary margin. Pegging through, Daniel found language about trusts, debt obligations, and a series of payments and penalties. The deal was familiar, ugly. Howard had borrowed enormous sums against Cornwell House in secret, naming Anna as collateral and Carter as a mysterious beneficiary. One document was darker than the rest, a letter in a woman's hand. "Howard, if you sign this, you forfeit our future. I swore I'd never become like the people who ruined us, but I had no other choice. If you read this, know that I loved you once. May this house forgive what I could not." Daniel's breath hitched. As he closed the lid, he noticed a set of faint scuff marks on the floor by the desk. Following his hunch, he knelt and pried open a loose board. Emily's old flashlight from his bag illuminated another hidden object, a red leather notebook, far newer than the diary. Just inside the front cover was a scrap of paper with his own name and a single chilling sentence: "He must never know the truth until he is wed." A creak echoed from the hall, too heavy, too real. Daniel spun, heart in his throat, and found Anna in the doorway, her face unreadable and her silhouette rigid against the darkness. "So," she said quietly, "you've let yourself in." In the threshold, Anna stood with an uncanny stillness, the soft light at her back turning her into little more than a silhouette cut from iron. Daniel froze where he knelt by the desk, guilty, exposed, clutching the red notebook as if it might shield him. Anna entered slowly, the air shifting with her presence. She shut the door behind her, fast and soft, a practiced gesture that spoke of years spent containing chaos. Daniel rose, swallowing words that tangled in his throat. The old legal documents and the forsaken contract lay scattered behind him like evidence at a crime scene. Anna's eyes did not falter from his, yet her voice was measured, too calm. "You were warned about locked doors." The words hung with neither anger nor surprise, only a tight fatigue. Daniel's response came out in a whisper: "You left me the key, or someone did." For a moment Anna said nothing. She crossed to the desk, her hand resting gently on the edge. She looked not at Daniel, but at the old photograph of herself and Howard, as if seeking permission from a ghost. "Perhaps you were meant to find what I kept hidden. This place has suffered too long under secrets." The silence pressed. Rain tapped lightly at the dusty panes. Heart pounding, Daniel pushed the red notebook toward her. "You put my name in here. He must never know the truth until he is wed." "What truth, Anna?" Her shoulders slumped, the posture of a woman not defeated, but exhausted by battles both public and private. "When Howard, my late husband, lost everything, he did it on purpose, believing it would punish me for refusing to accept his betrayals. He mortgaged this house to cover other debts, gambling that I'd be left destitute and tied to his memory. He named Michael Carter his partner and beneficiary, an enemy of my family once. I fought them both, and I won back the property, but at the cost of my reputation and nearly my soul." Daniel barely breathed as she spoke. She continued, voice rough-edged: "I started marrying for protection, not passion. Men and women alike, anyone who could act as a legal buffer against those who would see me ruined. Divorce, annulments, quick and cold. The town called me a monster for it. Eventually, I stopped looking for anyone at all. But the terms of the trust, Howard's trap, renewed every decade unless a marriage could fulfill certain public requirements." She laughed once, short and sharp. "The only way to break the cycle was to marry someone not from this world, a stranger who'd have nothing to gain by betraying me." Daniel waited, mind spinning as old failures and new wounds collided in his chest. "So you chose me because I was desperate, because I'd do anything to save my mother and sister." Anna finally looked at him, her gaze uncertain. "Not just because you were desperate, because I saw you, Daniel, rising above drowning, over and over. At first I thought desperation could be shaped into usefulness, but I underestimated kindness, yours, and perhaps my own hunger for company, even after all these years." She turned away, shoulders trembling. "Now you know I didn't want revenge, I wanted escape, maybe even forgiveness. But you deserve the truth, even if it costs me everything." Daniel stared at her, the woman he'd married for necessity, now exposed and terribly human, and wondered if compassion could grow from soil seeded by secrets. The room seemed to shrink around them, the walls echoing with the magnitude of Anna's confession. Daniel set the red notebook on the desk, its pages bristling with secrets and regret. Fatigue, sharp as hunger, gnawed at him, alongside an anger he had no safe place to lay. He faced Anna, voice trembling, too full to contain. "You used me. You could have said any of this before. Let me choose with the truth." Anna pressed one hand to her brow, her defenses thinning but not gone. "Would you have said yes if I had? Would your family have survived if you hadn't?" Her words were not an accusation, but a plea for him to understand the losses that had shaped her every move. Daniel shook his head, pacing the room, trying to collect the pieces of himself that felt scattered across the old hardwood. "You talk as if survival always means sacrificing someone else. Maybe that's why I see you as lonely." She regarded him, eyes shining not with tears but weary defiance. "Loneliness and desperation, those are the true partners in this house, as you've learned." Silence ballooned, heavy with what could not be unsaid. Finally, Daniel approached the desk, hands flat against its battered surface. "You made me complicit in this. You put me up as your shield, but you also gave me and my family a life raft, and sometimes I'm grateful for that. I just can't live every day in the shadow of Howard's ghost or the chains of your mistrust." Anna's composure wavered. "I brought you into this mess because I believed I could keep my world and its threats contained. But the more I came to know you, the more I realized how wrong I was." She leaned heavily on the desk, less the imperious matriarch and more a woman wrestling with her own sins. "If you wish to leave, Daniel, you may. The house, the stipend, your family's care, none of that will change. I promise." For a moment, Daniel hesitated. In her offer, he heard for the first time the possibility of choice, not bargain, an opening that felt both freeing and terrifying. "And what about you?" he asked. "What becomes of you if I walk out that door?" Anna's eyes, vulnerable in a way he hadn't seen before, sought his. "That's not your burden to carry, Daniel. I was prepared to end up alone again. Maybe it's what I deserve, but you deserve better." Smoke from the storm outside curled along the window's edges. Daniel stared at Anna, seeing not just the architect of a cage, but its oldest prisoner. "What if I stayed?" he asked, voice steadier now. "But we start again, this time without the secrets, without the walls." Anna let out a trembling breath, a laugh almost colored by hope and disbelief. "If you're willing to risk it, Daniel Foster, maybe, so am I. For once in my life." They stood there, surrounded by dust and dark, but also, finally, by possibility. The days that followed were uneasy, threaded with new hope and fresh danger. Anna and Daniel moved through the mansion's routines like actors now rehearsing for honesty, their conversations deeper, if not always comfortable. There were awkward pauses where they reached for trust and couldn't quite grasp it. Sometimes, while sitting across from Anna at dinner, Daniel was struck by how different she seemed. A commander stripped of her armor, still sharp but less alone. But outside the heavy doors of Cornwell House, the old threats had not evaporated. Whispers in town grew sharper. Two vehicles Daniel did not recognize began appearing on the street just beyond the gates, their engines idling for hours. At the grocer, strangers greeted him with two bright smiles and questions delivered with the softness of interrogation. Anna received terse, unsigned letters hinting at Howard's old debts and at Carter's return. Late one evening, as Daniel walked the upper gallery, Mrs. Green intercepted him, her face drawn tight. Her voice was low. "There's trouble brewing, Mr. Foster. Michael Carter has been seen in town. He's not alone. Anna isn't the only one with enemies invested in her ruin." That night, Daniel found Anna in her study, illuminated by the stark glow of her desk lamp. Piles of legal documents and old ledgers spilled across the desk. She looked up, surprise flickering. "Can't sleep?" He hesitated. "Should I be worried about Carter? About anyone else coming here?" Anna's jaw tightened. "Carter was Howard's old accomplice. He's tried to get this house from me for years, using lawyers, threats, private investigations. I thought after our marriage the trust's terms would be fulfilled and he'd move on. Evidently, I underestimated his resolve." Daniel sat across from her, brow furrowed. "And if he pushes harder?" Her eyes sharpened. "I won't be blackmailed. But if you feel unsafe, Daniel, if you want to leave until this blows over, I'll arrange it." He shook his head. Leaving would make things worse. He's using me as much as he's using you. Maybe more. Their alliance now forged not by necessity but choice. They spent hours plotting, Anna marshalling the lawyers, Daniel gathering evidence of Carter's surveillance and old correspondence. They reached out to Rachel, Daniel's old friend and now a junior attorney, asking for advice. Rachel promised to pull public records on Carter and investigate rumors swirling through Dryden's legal world. At midnight, Anna paused, rubbing her eyes. "You should rest. I'm accustomed to storms like this, Daniel. Don't let my history consume you." He almost laughed. "Too late for that. But I'm here, Anna. I won't run. Not now." She glanced up, eyes shining with mingled gratitude and dread. "That's what frightens me the most." Daniel returned to his suite, sleep elusive, nerves tingling at every creak and gust of wind. He thought of his mother, Emily, the risks the mansion's stones seemed to absorb, both old and new. He remembered Anna's trembling hand, the way her voice had sounded, fragile and real, and realized this was the most alive he'd felt since arriving. Outside, thunder rolled. Somewhere an engine growled in the night, waiting, as always, for an opportunity. It happened late on a Friday, one of those nights when the world outside Cornwell House seemed to press especially close. The kitchen lights glowed golden in the pre-dawn hours as Daniel accepted a cup of strong tea from Mrs. Green, whose eyes had grown clouded and anxious. Anna was locked in her study, the house unusually tense. Then, a sudden crash. A window shattered. The sharp sound cut the night. Daniel bolted up. Through the cracked glass of the east parlor, a figure climbed in, heavy-set and masked, flashlight sweeping across family portraits and heirlooms. Daniel skidded out the door and ran for Anna's study, nearly colliding with her in the corridor as she clutched an old ledger to her chest. "It's Carter," Anna said, voice ice-sharp. "He's grown impatient." "Go to my room. Lock the door," Daniel whispered. He doubled back, stealth guiding his steps. In the parlor, he caught sight of Carter, a bull of a man with graying hair, his face beaded with sweat, red with drink and rage. Carter ransacked drawers and cabinets, flinging antique vases and silver to the floor. "Where is it?" he snarled. "You know what I came for, Anna. I'm owed, after all you and Howard did." Daniel stepped from the shadows, surprising even himself. His voice was steadier than he felt. "Put it down, Carter. There are police on the way." Carter wheeled toward him, weaponless but wild-eyed. "You're her latest pawn, aren't you? Pretty boy with nothing to lose." He spat at Daniel's feet. "You think you can save her? You don't know anything. Anna ruined me, and she'll ruin you too." Anna had entered softly behind Daniel, no fear in her face now, only cold fury. "You ruined yourself, Michael. I simply survived." Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Carter snatched at Anna, but Daniel blocked him. In the struggle, the ledger tumbled open. Contracts and photos spilled onto the ornate carpet, clear proof of Carter's schemes, Howard's betrayals, the house's poisoned history. Everything seemed to freeze in that moment, the house's heart exposed, old wounds reopening. Anna, determined, called to Daniel, "Take the evidence, now." He scooped up the documents, sidestepping Carter's desperate lunge. When police finally burst into the hallway, Carter was against the wall, breathing heavy and defeated, surrounded by echoes of his own ruin. After the officers led him out in handcuffs, Anna and Daniel stood in the foyer, the space between them charged with relief and unshed grief. Anna leaned on the banister, her mask gone. "I never wanted any of this for you, for anyone." Daniel offered her his hand, unsure where courage ended and hope began. "We survived it. Together." Moonlight silvered her hair as Anna nodded. "This house can be a prison or a promise, Daniel. The choice is ours, for as long as we can bear it." He squeezed her trembling fingers, silently vowing not to let history repeat itself. Not for them, not ever again. The days that followed pulsed with a frenetic energy so different from the mansion's usual hush. Police came and went, cataloging evidence and taking statements. Anna gave her account with crisp clarity, her voice iron-strong as she named Carter as a decades-old tormentor, a man who thrived on blackmail, manipulation, and legal technicalities. Daniel added his testimony, every word tying the puzzle together. With Carter in custody, details poured from official records and aged files. A decades-long campaign waged from the shadows. Anna and Howard's legal battles, Carter's loan sharking, the deeds and debts that had nearly stripped Cornwell House bare. The evidence Daniel retrieved from the hidden room, the contracts, the letters, helped unravel Carter's legal chokehold. Rachel, Daniel's friend and Anna's new legal advisor, coordinated with investigators, ensuring Carter's old threats never resurfaced. For the first time in weeks, Daniel slept deeply in his suite. The shadows seemed lighter. The staff eased too, their fear replaced by cautious optimism. One morning, Anna found Daniel in the rose garden, where raindrops from a passing shower still beaded the velvet petals. She moved more softly now, not as an overseer, but as someone relearning how to walk in her own home. "I used to think this house would outlast every enemy," Anna said, kneeling beside a cluster of new growth. "It nearly devoured me instead." Daniel brushed away a wilted leaf, meeting her gaze. "It could still be a place people come to heal, not hide." He paused, clearing his throat. "What will you do now?" Anna looked at the pale sky. For the first time, he saw her without the careful armor, just a woman made of hard-won wisdom, fragile hope, and a yearning she hadn't dared voice. "I'll release this house, Daniel. It doesn't have to own me anymore. I'm thinking of turning half the property into a trust. A place for women who need shelter and a future, not just a fortress against the past." Daniel smiled, unexpected warmth rising within him. "It's a good idea, Anna. Not just for them, for you too." That evening, Cornwell House hosted a quiet dinner, just Anna, Daniel, Rachel, and Mrs. Green. There were no formalities, only soft laughter, unguarded conversation, and the scent of fresh bread and roses. When Daniel's phone buzzed with an update from the district attorney's office, Carter's confession, the case closed, Anna's name cleared, a hush fell over the table. Anna reached across and squeezed Daniel's hand in gratitude and relief. Later, as twilight gathered in the corners of the house, Anna and Daniel lingered alone near the grand staircase. The hush wasn't cold anymore. It was possibility. "Stay with me a while," Anna said, her voice neither imperious nor pleading. Daniel nodded, suddenly unafraid. "I will, Anna. Not because I owe you, because after all this I choose to." Cornwell House watched them, its shadows warmer than before as justice and something healing settled quietly on the air. Seasons spun forward, and Cornwell House changed with them. Workmen arrived to mend windows, repaint walls, and clear out wings long kept empty. Yet amidst the hum of restoration, something subtler grew in its halls, a sense of renewal, of burdens placed gently down. Anna moved through the house lighter, almost unrecognizable from the woman who had once commanded with ice and iron. Daniel kept up his studies, now unencumbered by gnawing fear. He volunteered with Anna at the community clinic on weekends, quietly paying forward the lifeline he'd once received. Side by side at counseling sessions and charity events, something gentle and real grew between them, born not of romantic fantasy, but mutual respect and hard-won trust. In the midst of their new rhythm, an envelope arrived, sealed with a wax stamp neither recognized. Inside was a letter, unsigned but unmistakably written by Mrs. Green, who had left quietly the week Carter was sentenced. "Forgiveness is the rarest kind of courage. I saw two souls imprisoned by memory and pride, but now I see hope. Let this place be sanctuary for wounded hearts, not one more monument to pain, all my faith and gratitude." Anna pressed the letter to her chest, tears welling in eyes unused to releasing sorrow. Daniel placed a steady hand on hers. "She saw who you really are, Anna, who you could be, with or without me." When spring arrived, Anna fulfilled her promise. She established the Cornwell Trust, its first residents women fleeing domestic violence and destitution. She gave rooms that once echoed with guilt and loneliness to those who needed shelter, dignity, and a second start. Together, Daniel and Anna packed up relics of the past. Some went to the Historical Society, some to storage, some, like the Red Notebook and Howard's letters, were burned in a small, private ritual in the rose garden. Ashes scattered on the new blooms, the burden at last transformed. At the end of a long day, Daniel found Anna at her favorite window, gazing at a world breaking into green. He joined her, silence stretching like wings. "For years I built prisons inside and out," she murmured, the lines of her face softened by twilight. "But lately I wonder, can we ever be done atoning?" Daniel smiled, leaning against the glass. "Maybe not, but at least now we try, together." She took his hand, fingers trembling but unafraid. They watched as sun slipped behind the oaks, painting the world with gold and promise. No more secrets, no more debts, or at least none left unpaid. Their story had begun with necessity and desperation, but it endured, unexpectedly, because both had found, in the other, the possibility of redemption. And in that quiet hour, Cornwell House was no longer a cage, but a testament to forgiveness, second chances, and the kind of love that grows, slowly, stubbornly, from the darkest soil. A year passed, and the rhythms of Cornwell House were changed forever. Gone was the air of wary constraint. In its place came laughter, the patter of children's feet from the women rebuilding their lives, and the genuine warmth of a place reborn. The drive, once strangled by weeds, now blazed with wildflowers. The mansion's somber windows looked out each morning on hope painted in sunrise. Daniel finished his degree, his graduation ceremony marked not by nerves or fear, but by pride sparkling in his mother's eyes and the steady comfort of Anna's presence at his side. He'd grown into himself, no longer a silhouette burdened by debt, but a young man who knew, intimately, the steep cost and priceless reward of mercy. Anna, too, was transformed. She relinquished her iron schedules and softened into her role as matron, mentor, and friend to the women and children finding sanctuary at Cornwell House. Occasionally she sat with them at dusk, weaving her own story into the patchwork of their struggles and victories. Sometimes new residents were surprised by the woman who swept the parlor or baked the bread, never guessing she was the mistress of the estate. On the anniversary of Carter's arrest, Daniel and Anna hosted a garden party for every family, friend, and resident who had helped remake the house and their lives. Voices echoed across the lawn, as did music, the laughter of children, and the toasts of newfound friends. During the celebration, Daniel found himself at the rose garden's edge, reflecting on everything: the desperation that had driven him into Anna's orbit, the darkness he'd crossed, the fragile trust that had grown into real companionship. Anna joined him, her hair silver in the setting sun, her eyes wistful. "If you could choose again," she asked, her smile tinged with old sorrow and new hope. Daniel took her hand, steady as ever. "I would choose differently, but not because I want a different ending. I'd just start sooner, say yes to the truth, to vulnerability, before the world forced our hands." Anna squeezed his hand in reply, overcome. "Thank you for making this place a home, Daniel, for redeeming not just me, but all the years lost to bitterness." He smiled, recognizing at last the beauty in their imperfect journey. "We saved each other, Anna. That's all that matters." As dusk deepened into gentle dark, Daniel and Anna stood together in the garden, no longer wardens or prisoners, but companions, co-architects of a better future. Their pasts, once a burden too great to bear, had given way to something rare and quietly powerful. Not merely a second chance, but a lasting testament to forgiveness, healing, and chosen family. Inside, laughter spilled down the corridors. The house that had once embodied pride, secrecy, and loss had become, through courage, kindness, and hard-won trust, a home. And for Daniel and Anna, as the stars kindled above Cornwell House, it was at last the beginning of everything. If this tale of sacrifice, secrets, and second chances moved you, let us know. Comment below with your thoughts, favorite moments, or what you would have done in Daniel's place. Don't forget to like if you enjoyed the story, and subscribe for more captivating tales of romance, suspense, and redemption. Your support means the world and helps keep these stories alive. Join our community and never miss a new journey.